530.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. We'll have more on the heat in a little bit, but first, while lawmakers in Washington held hearings today to address gun violence, the Attorney General announced new charges against the alleged shooter in the Buffalo supermarket shooting, and he met privately with survivors and family members of the victims. CBS's Trinity Chavez has the latest from New York.
Attorney General Merrick Garland laid flowers at a memorial in Buffalo to honor the 10 lives lost at the Tops supermarket.
In the days and weeks since the attack, we have all witnessed the strength of this community's bonds, its resilience, and its love. I am humbled to have just felt that firsthand.
Garland outlined new hate crime charges filed against the alleged shooter, who could face the death penalty if convicted.
The affidavit in support of the complaint quotes the defendant as stating that his goal was to, quote, kill as many blacks as possible.
On the heels of the Buffalo shooting, New York State has already toughened gun control laws, and now the focus is on federal lawmakers to act.
I plead with you to pass common sense gun legislation so children and youth can grow up in safe communities.
The Senate Judiciary Committee heard from witnesses on Wednesday, demanding action to protect children from gun violence.
Never for a moment did I think that he would be murdered in his English class.
Florida father Max Schachter lost his son Alex in the Parkland shooting.
We cannot focus on school safety only when a tragedy happens. School safety must be a year-round priority.
The Senate is working to hash out a bipartisan deal reached earlier this week to combat gun violence that includes new red flag laws and enhanced background checks on gun buyers. Trinity Chavez, CBS News, New York.
The suspect in Buffalo, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, faces 26 counts of hate crimes and firearms offenses. For more now on the bipartisan gun deal and other hot topics right now in Washington, D.C., let's check in with WYMT's White House correspondent John Decker. And John, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell appears to be backing this deal to combat gun violence. So where does that stand right now?
Well, that's right. The Senate Minority Leader announced his support for this framework for gun legislation yesterday. That's a real shot in the arm in terms of it passing the Senate, in the sense that he is the leader of Republicans, and there are many members who look to see how their leader votes on any particular issue. What we are told is there's a lot of optimism right now for this legislation moving forward to be signed by President Biden, having legislation on his desk for his signature by the end of next month. That's the timeline they're looking at.
Another topic, John, there was, of course, some elections last night across the country. Former President Trump's endorsements were put to the test in two key primary races in South Carolina. What did we learn from the results last night?
It was a mixed bag, Steve. You had one Republican primary in which the incumbent Tom Rice was running to be the standard bearer for Republicans in the general election. He voted for the impeachment of former President Donald Trump associated with his activities or non-activities on January the 6th, and that engendered the ire of the former president. He endorsed Tom Rice's opponent, and Tom Rice's opponent won handily. But then you had this other primary taking place in the Charleston area of South Carolina. Nancy Mace, the incumbent, running in a contested primary. Donald Trump endorsed Nancy Mace's opponent. Reason being is because Nancy Mace blamed Donald Trump for the riot, the Capitol riot on January 6th of 2021. But Nancy Mace emerged victorious. She won by 7 percentage points. She will be the Republican in the general election. So that's why I say it was a mixed bag for the former president.
Well, the committee investigating the January 6th riot postponed its hearing scheduled for today. Why did that happen?
It happened, we're told, by committee members because certain witnesses were not ready in terms of preparations for their testimony today, and also because there were certain multimedia exhibits that also were not prepared to show to the general public. But it's just been postponed. It will be rescheduled perhaps as early as next week. There is another committee hearing tomorrow. It will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central Time. That will focus on all of the pressure that was brought to bear on former Vice President Mike Pence by former President Donald Trump not to certify the results of the November 2020 election. We're going to hear from a number of witnesses in Mike Pence's inner circle and also in the former president's inner circle who were in the White House, in the Oval Office on January 6th. So that's what we're going to hear tomorrow during that congressional hearing.
Yeah, and I believe CBS plans to carry that live tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Today marks the 10th anniversary of DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Next month, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals will hear a lawsuit challenging that program, and you recently spoke to former DHS Chief Jay Johnson. Where does he stand on that issue?
Yeah, Jay Johnson, former DHS secretary during President Obama's time in office. The DACA is now 10 years old. I asked him about this very subject. I think we have a clip of that.
Let's codify into law the DACA program. Let's protect those who came to this country as children and who are de facto Americans, have been living in this country almost their entire life. There are, John, DACA recipients who are in places like Yale and Georgetown Law School now. Some of them ask me, what's my future, Mr. Johnson? And I have to tell them, I don't know, as long as Congress refuses to do this.
You know, Steve, there is actually bipartisan support for what former Secretary of DHS Jay Johnson talked about. Unfortunately, for those who wish to see DACA legislation passed, typically what happens is there are amendments attached to that legislation. There's no standalone legislation which would enable it to pass the House and the Senate. So as long as you have these amendments attached to that particular legislation, the chances for passage are very unlikely.
All right, John, appreciate the updates on all those issues. Thank you very much. There will be more about all of this later tonight at 6:30 on the CBS Evening News. And back to our other big talker of the week, and that has been the heat. Dangerous heat, record heat. As a matter of fact, we did break 2 records today. Yet again, it's the 3rd day in a row that we have broken records at both Jackson and London. Outside right now around the region, plenty of sunshine. You see a different view from the high knob camera at UVA Wise, and I quite like this one. Mid-80s out there this afternoon out in Wise. So, you know, if it's the mid-80s in Wise, it's even warmer elsewhere. Not a cloud in the sky. Mountain Parkway at Slade right now, so it is rather toasty. How about 95 degrees outside here in Hazard? Same thing in Manchester, Middlesboro, Monticello. It's 96 in Irvine. So you factor in dew points. They've come down a little, low to mid-70s as opposed to the mid and upper 70s. Either way, it still feels like 101 in Hazard, 100 Manchester and Prestonsburg, 102 Manchester, 104 Monticello, feels like 107 in Wayne. So dangerous heat continues. No showers or storms to cool us off. We are firmly in place with the high pressure, and we will continue to watch, well, not much happen other than very hot weather continuing into tonight. So those heat safety tips, we always talk about these this time of year. Check up on the elderly, the sick. If you know someone without air conditioning, check on them. Light, loose-fitting clothing outside. If you have to be outside, take frequent breaks. Plenty of water outside as well. Grab the sunscreen, and always, always, always look before you lock. Never leave the kids or the pets in a hot car, even if you're just running into the store for maybe just a second. I'll have the very latest on how long this heat looks to stick around and when we can finally see some relief coming up in a few minutes. Steve? All right, Evan, thank you. These extreme temperatures have EMS workers running on a lot of calls about patients suffering from a heat-related illness. Shelby Lofton and photojournalist Darnell Crenshaw caught up with 2 different Kentucky EMS departments about these specific runs and what paramedics are doing to keep themselves cool.
It's a busy Wednesday afternoon for Georgetown Scott County EMS. In the last 4 days, paramedics here have answered 8 to 10 calls regarding heat-related illness. If these extreme temperatures remain steady, they expect these types of calls to rise.
Certain medications make people more susceptible to heat-related emergencies.
Paramedic Robert Ball is restocking his ambulance, making sure he has enough items to cool a person off if it's needed.
The goal is to actually bring their temperature down without actually bringing it down too fast.
Corey Wood is the assistant director of the Georgetown Scott County EMS. He says most heat-related calls are from people working outside.
Usually yard work is the big one. people going out and getting in their yard and spending way too much time outside in the heat and not realizing it before it's too late.
In the last 7 days, we've had 12 patients treated by our ambulances for a heat-related emergency.
Lexington firefighter Holly Buckenroth says their firefighters are prepared to fight the heat. They have ice water for the crew on standby. Patients may need a simple cold, wet towel to fight heat exhaustion.
And then you can wrap that around someone around the neck.
Firefighters are restocking emergency kits for the next heat-related run, and it could happen at night.
Yes, there have been several heat runs at night, and my suspicion is that they were, experiencing those symptoms during the day, and then by the time night came, they were starting to experience symptoms.
If need be, Lexington Fire has a trailer that can be used as a cooling center for their firefighters and paramedics. Times like this, it may be needed. House fires inside can reach 1,600 degrees, not to mention the heavy, thick gear they have to wear. In Lexington, Shelby Lofton, WKYT.
Lexington firefighters say the heat has suspended some fire training exercises. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, the Federal Reserve is hiking interest rates, the largest hike in nearly 30 years. How the move could help ease inflation, but impact your wallet.
And first, we're continuing to watch oppressive and dangerous heat in the mountains this week, but we do have some changes on the way. The details on those next.